Thank you for taking time out of your day. We're obviously here to have a chat about The Sound, which is coming to US theatres very soon. This is a film that you wrote and directed. Where did the idea for the story come from? And as someone who's a writer-director, what is your writing process? Have you already got the shots lined up as you're writing? How does your process work?
Um, I think talking to other creatives, I think everyone has a kind of a different process as far as how they put together stuff. For me, I could say I get struck with a bolt of lightning, but I don't. Like I have to piece it together almost like I'm building Legos or something like that. For this one, me personally, after college in the mid '90s, I moved to a place called Telluride, Colorado, which is way up in the mountains, and I got into ice climbing and rock climbing and mountains and all that sort of thing. So I have a personal background with these kind of themes and rock climbing. And I had watched the great documentary Free Solo with Alex Honnold, and I had read a review where someone called it the best horror movie they'd ever seen, and they were being quite serious. And it just kind of the light bulb went off that like, oh, people think, obviously that's scary because he doesn't have a rope, but people for climbers, we don't necessarily realize that that is frightening to other people, right? Being on the side of a wall or 100 feet in the air, it's no big deal to me, but for other people it is. And so I came up with the idea of like maybe if we did a horror thriller with on the side of a rock wall, it would just build in some sort of tension, extra tension into the film that wouldn't normally be there in other settings. So that's kind of where that started from. I've always been a big fan of the movie The Thing back in the early 80s, John Carpenter's classic. And so pulled some themes out of that, especially with kind of our alien entity and stuff like that. And my elevator pitch for this has always been Free Solo times The Thing, which I think is a pretty apt description of the film. And as far as my creative process goes, I think I'm a little bit weird. I can't start writing until I have the whole film in my head, like the
Okay.
beginning, like the all the scenes, everything. I know people write outlines and index cards and put stuff up on billboards. I I have to have it all worked out in my head. And then when I write, I usually edit when I write. So my first drafts are generally a little bit more coherent than maybe some people whose creative process. I know people who just get down and bang out something for 3 days and then go back and then redo it. I'm write a page and then I go back and was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. And as they say, writing is rewriting. And so I think I probably did like 20 drafts of this or something like that. But um, yeah, it's always a process for sure for me.
This is your sort of second feature after the Canyonlands. What lessons did you learn on that project that you put into practice here?
I don't think we have enough time to go through all the lessons I learned on the Canyonlands. Don't film 20 miles outside of Moab where you don't have power or gas or anything like that. That was a big lesson we learned. Um, you know, for those of us who didn't go to film school like myself, I cut my chops in live music production and learning how to build productions, through experience. And certainly doing a film like that was over ambitious for the budget and everything taught me a lot about what I shouldn't do. And sometimes that's necessary. Like we learn sometimes from stuff that works out, but I think especially in filmmaking, in my case, we learn from stuff that from mistakes that we made. And so from this on this project, I was like, okay, I'm not going to make the mistakes that I made on the Canyonlands. I'm going to make new ones, but I'm not going to make the ones that I made on the previous one, which is, like I said, the list is long.
And like you said, the story focuses on a group of climbers. How did you go about, shooting those scenes? Because obviously a lot of the film is spent with climbers attached to the wall. I think I'm right in saying that there were some real life climbers who kind of were part of it, but how did you go about sort of filming those sequences?
Yeah, it was really important to me from the start to present rock climbing very authentically and to bring the audience along with the climb. And I think a lot of times at this budget level and sort of contained horror, smaller horrors, it becomes tough to world build, like to get out of whatever your little set is and show the audience, a giant world that you're building. And so it became important to not just have close-ups of the actors and their dialogue, right, that we shot on an LED volume stage, here in Las Vegas on a set, but to go out into the real world and shoot climbers on 1,500-foot walls. And very early on in the pre-production, I realized that I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that with a traditional rock climbing or traditional film crew and actors. That I had to go out and basically make two movies at once. One was with professional rock climbers and a professional rock climbing film crew, and the other was with our actors, traditional actors with a traditional film crew inside the studio, and then marrying the two films, as it were, in post. So yeah, that's what we did. We had professional rock climbers kind of wear the same clothes the actors wore in the studio, and they went and climbed a 1,500-foot wall for us.
And creating the movie monster is I feel it must always be a stressful experience, especially, given how many there are in the world. How did you work on making the entity within the sound different to some of those others?
Well, to start out, there wasn't a physical, I don't want to give too much away, a physical entity until later on in development. It was always a sound wave. One, I just thought that was cool. Like, I've never really seen a sound wave be a villain, right? And it presented some easier things about filmmaking. I don't have to cast an actor or deal with that aspect. It can just bounce around to people, right? Because it's sound. But then, as the development happens and you realize, okay, we actually need something, we need something physical for the actors to react to or something. We had a set prop that was there so they could look at. But then in post, we, redid everything with VFX. And yeah, came up with the idea. There's some themes about somatic images in this film. And if someone doesn't know what somatic images, it gets explained in the film. Those are all real. And we thought it would be cool to kind of use those somatic images in with the um, physical parts of the entity. And for those who don't know what somatic image is, like sound when it hits a membrane or something will make geometric patterns. This is all real. This has been done for 200 years. And the somatic images we have in this film are actually authentic. I had someone who makes them make those, and what I did was I spoke the words into a microphone. They record your words, and then they record the cinematic images. So the stuff that you see in the film is all actually real. When the words that it's saying is me saying those words, and those are cinematic images are real. So we kind of combined that with the sound waves to give it sort of a physical presence.
And amongst your cast, you've got Kyle Gass and William Fichtner. How does having these, familiar faces and names help a film like The Sound?
Well, without the business, there's no show, and so you need to have business. And the first question that a distributor is going to ask you in independent filmmaking is who's in your film. They don't care what it's about. They don't care about any of that stuff. The first question you're going to get is who's in your film, because that's all, not at all, but at the beginning, that's what a distributor wants to know is how can we market this film, right? Horror is one of those few genres left where you can still kind of have a no-name cast. As long as your idea is good and it's executed well, you can still, do okay. But really, it's the truth is it's for marketing, right? And it's be able to say, yeah, I've got, Bill Fichtner in my cast. There are obviously benefits to that. He's an amazing actor. There's a reason why he's been in so many awesome films is because Bill's a great guy and he's an amazing actor. And I think no slight to the other actors in the film, but his scenes are almost some of the pinnacle, I believe, of the acting in the film, right? And so you get something other than marketing when you bring in high profile people. But there also is just the reality of the budgets, right? The entire budget for this film couldn't hire, George Clooney or Brad Pitt or something like that, So like you have to try to balance your budget constraints. And if you're a no-name director like me, let's be honest, like I'm not like, ringing up Tom Cruise and he's going, yeah, I want to work with you, like Wes Anderson or people like that, you have to present them an idea that they buy into to want to join your project. So I'm just grateful that Bill loved the script, that he wanted to do it, he was available, and yeah, someone like Kyle. I've always been a huge Tenacious D fan. I used to work with them a little bit back when I was a roadie, 25 years ago, and a lot of times in this business, it's all about relationships, just like any other business. But in the film business, it's about relationship. And so, for Bill, I was working with his agent casting somebody else in the film. And so once you already have that relationship with the agent, you can go, hey, is Bill interested in this? We can pay him X amount of dollars. Well, let me see if he likes the scripts. Or for Kyle Gass, he was represented at the time by the same agent who represented David Clennon, who's in the film, was in the thing, and Jocelyn Houdon, who's now star of Chicago Fire, the TV show. And so you kind of look to bundle, actors of like, hey, I'm taking two of your clients here. I've got another role. Maybe you can give me a little break on the thing, on the price. But it always comes down, especially when you're talking about higher profile actors joining independent films like this. Do they like the project? Do they like the scripts? Somebody like Bill Fichtner is not going to necessarily attach his name to unless you pay him $1 million or something. But even then, somebody like him probably won't do a film that they don't think is any good. So I'm very fortunate to have some of those higher profile actors join the project for sure.
I guess my last question, you've had rafting in the Canyonlands, rock climbing in the Sound. What extreme sport are you tackling for film three?
Not any screams for the next film. We're doing more of a traditional, thank God, more of a traditional thriller. As I'm a little wary about filming on places where anybody can die at any time, and being outside under the with being whatever happens with the weather. So I do have an idea for a ski thriller horror, and so we'll see if I can somehow get that going. But right now, the next project is more mainstream, and certainly there is room for the sequel to The Sound if it becomes viable.
Nice. Well, I look forward to seeing, what film three is, and best of luck with the release of the Sound.